So here it is, Transport Tycoon Deluxe. When I first played this game, I played for 10 hours, and I haven't done that with a game in a while. This game is one of those games like Civilization 2 or Railroad Tycoon 2, so I love this game, although my subsequent attempts for making this video were much more challenging. I found that settings matter a lot, luck plays a role on some level, and there are a lot of quirks of this game that I wasn't completely familiar with. And this session that I made this video out of was 2 hours 16 minutes. So this will eventually be a long play, I think. But in the short term, I'm going to show you the beginnings of it. So here I have my disasters switched off, which I highly recommend, otherwise you have things that have nothing to do with reality destroying your vehicles, like UFO attacks and things like this. Most of this stuff I left default. Vehicle breakdowns are the one other thing that I switched to reduced, because otherwise you get 30 or 40 or 50 breakdowns between servicing, which is not realistic at all and is a significant inhibition to achieving anything. And otherwise I left everything default, because this is only really a demonstration of the basic capabilities of this game. So I'm not sure what else there is to say. Unfortunately, most of the vehicles you see in the opening screen there, I didn't get a chance to try. I did try the generate random new game, as with the original Transport Tycoon, and I tried to come up with a look-alike to Harry Vanderbilt, my character from the last one. I wasn't completely successful, but when I cycled through the faces for long enough, I eventually found a suitable look-alike. It looks as if it's not just images, but combinations of images to generate the different faces. Although all of them, as I've said before, end up looking kind of ridiculous, although I think these guys look a little bit more normal than the characters in the original Transport Tycoon. So I opted for this guy. He sort of looks like the Harry Vanderbilt from the last one. And you might say, why did I reuse the name Harry Vanderbilt? Well, because I don't really have any imagination on this topic. And I didn't want to apply my own name to these weirdos, you know. So I ended up looking out for the opening of this game because I have two towns right next to each other that would be good bus destinations. So I'm going to connect them. And my first transport service of my new company will be a bus service, which in Transport Tycoon and Transport Tycoon Deluxe, my experience is this is usually the case. Even if buses are not a good choice for the long term because their profit margin just isn't large enough to deal with basically your interest payments. Your interest payments are a plague in Transport Tycoon Deluxe, just as they are in the original Transport Tycoon. I don't even know how realistic it is, really, that you would capitalize a company in such a manner that you can't keep up with your interest payments. But I put in 2 bus stations there and a depot, same as in the original Transport Tycoon. Visually, these two games are incredibly similar. They do give you generic vehicle names because apparently they had some kind of copyright dispute with some owners of some of the names of generally discontinued transport equipment. It seems like kind of a strange story to me because almost everything in Transport Tycoon is no longer built in real life by companies which are largely defunct. These companies are completely fictional, though. And I decided to build 2 buses for this route because I expect the demand will be high enough to support them. One disadvantage of this route is that the towns are fairly close together, and in both Railroad Tycoon 2 and Transport Tycoon Deluxe, the distance that you travel with freight and passengers will impact the rates that you can charge. You always make more money for longer routes than for shorter routes, even though in real life it's rarely that simple. In real life, often the shorter routes are higher priced. But in the universe of Transport Tycoon and the universe of Railroad Tycoon, longer routes are usually better. The problem is you can't usually afford to build them at the beginning of the game. So that's the only reason I'm in this situation. Notice that power plant there, down in the lower right. I later on add a railway line to connect that with a coal mine, which is a medium distance route. You can see the coal mine there? So it's kind of medium, short to medium distance. But the amount of coal that I'm able to transport means that I can make a lot of money on that route compared with the bus routes. So I get started on that right away, knowing that the bus routes are not going to really pay the bills. So I align the station correctly, I try to put it in. And I notice that the land is not entirely as flat as it needs to be, but the station itself can be actually built. Then I put in a depot, make the terrible mistake of aligning it wrong, and I lose a huge amount of money. I rebuild it. Meanwhile, one of my competitors is opened. Now, eventually, you won't actually see it in the video, but eventually I changed the way this track layout was set up so that I could loop the train around between the depot and the station. I found that's one little trick. If you set up your switches to be a loop, it will actually behave like a loop, even though in real life it would never work that way. I did do a wider loop there, which turned out not to work. But as you'll see, this line is actually a moneymaker. I discovered that in Transport Tycoon, mine to power plant operations actually make quite a lot of money, and I think they might actually make more money than in Railroad Tycoon. Possibly. It's one of these experiments I would like to follow up. Try a game with Railroad Tycoon doing mine to power plant operations to see if you can really make a lot of money that way, because I never took it very seriously. I always thought of steel mills as the thing to do with basically mine to plant operations, because you can continue the supply chain, if you will, through finished goods. That much is true. In Transport Tycoon, if you get a good mine to steel mill operation, you can then transport the steel to a factory, and the factory can produce goods, which you can then ship to population centers. But it is a more complicated thing to set up, there's no question, and it takes a lot more time and a lot more accumulation of capital to start with. Whereas a mine to power plant operation, while politically incorrect, is actually an excellent moneymaker in the Transport Tycoon universe. And in the 1950s, it was not a clear-cut environmental issue anyway. That's a whole history in and of itself. So I put in signals here for multiple tracks at either end, but a single track, I don't know if you would call it main line, but single track mine to power plant line. And here I'm choosing the Cheney Jubilee, which is really an LMS Jubilee. They at least kept that name original. And I add a bunch of coal cars. Strangely, they're calling them coal cars and not coal wagons, even though I have this set up mostly for British terminology. I think the exception is I'm working in dollars and not in pounds. That was just a detail that I overlooked when I set the game up. It doesn't have much to do with anything else. It's not really deliberate, it's more negligent, if you will. So my train there, because I set up that loop wrong, it is going all the way out to the power plant with empty coal wagons, which I'm not thrilled by, but it will give the mine a chance to accumulate the coal that I need for a profitable run. Now, looking at this little village here, Little Drenfingfield, British and not German, I think I can put in a local bus service, which probably won't make a huge amount of money, but might make a little bit of money. So, finding a place for the depot is quite difficult in this situation because the village is on a hillside. I have to demolish a lot of buildings to make room for it. One of the things I did find in Transport Tycoon is that you run into political difficulties if you destroy too much stuff in a town, so the government won't allow you to build anything in the town after you've invested a huge amount of money getting the town ready. So here I give up because it seems too risky to demolish anything more if I'm not going to be able to lower that land. So I look for other places that I could use for my bus station and depot. Meanwhile, the train has made a delivery and made me over $7,000, which in the Transport Tycoon universe is not bad at all for one run. And if I continue to a long play of this, you'll see that that can go up by quite a bit if you have a run that's longer. Again, following the principle that the further you transport something in Transport Tycoon, the more you get paid for it, which, as I said, is not entirely realistic, but it's at least reasonably predictable if you're trying to plan lines in Transport Tycoon or Tycoon, as I mentioned. I have a depot and bus station for the north part of town there, and the south part of town will get a bus station by this airport, which I didn't actually build. One of my competitors built that. I've found that airports in the Transport Tycoon series are not an ideal moneymaker, at least not in the early stages of the game. Basically, the running costs are too high to justify the money you could make by hauling relatively small numbers of passengers and mail. It's interesting to have them. I mean, and you could argue that the airports are more useful than the ports, because there's not really enough water in most of these scenarios to justify any shipping. Generally, a bridge will work just fine, or an air service. If you have a population center isolated on an island somewhere, which is, as I said, relatively unusual in Transport Tycoon. Generally, everything is landlocked or pretty close to landlocked. So I didn't make anywhere near as much money on that run. $876, but I think the solution to that is to force the train to take a full load at the mines. That's not a feature I always love to use because it tends to delay the trains, and if they don't find a cargo, they can end up stuck somewhere. But In this case, I think it might be justified to set it up that way, because this train seems to be going back and forth without doing very much useful. So maybe go to the orders, select the mines, full load. And unlike Locomotion and the latest version of Transport Tycoon, that will be automatically coal. I don't have to tell it you must load the train full of coal, because the type of freight cars and the customer make that obvious. As many people have said, it's easy to argue that the older Transport Tycoon games do run a bit better and are a little bit better conceived than the later ones. The later ones have not received universally good reviews. Although I think they're still good. I don't, think that you would be regretting learning how to play Locomotion or something. I think maybe more the issue is you would have to learn how to play it. Whereas Transport Tycoon in the first two versions is not too counterintuitive. It's primitive by modern standards. There are some things about it which maybe are disappointing compared to maybe Transport Fever or something like that that's newer. But I found this game thoroughly enjoyable, and as I said, my first attempt at Transport Tycoon Deluxe resulted in a 10-hour game that I've saved. So that's another thing I might do a video on in the future, is my continuation of that game. I didn't take a video of the initial game, unfortunately. I wasn't anticipating how good it was going to be. I had been playing Locomotion in preparation for this video series about 13 days in a row, and I was a little bit skeptical because I felt that I had learned everything I could learn and that this would just be a more primitive version of Locomotion, but apparently not so. Anyway, I still have Road Vehicle 3 being monitored there. It's only making a little bit of money at a time. But when this coal train gets loaded up, I'll hopefully have some revenue. Almost there. So the coal train got another highball there, fully loaded. And the mines are filling up there. I have the window of the mines station there. Seems like the coal production is pretty steady. But I'm assuming the train's going to have to wait for a full load. And indeed, it is just past half full just now. The company cash is respectably high, actually, when you consider what it's been. And that I've done all this investment. So my bus there is broken down. And the coal train's finally departing. Well, I have enough money in the company cash now to repay some of that loan, so I'll do that. But some is kind of the key word there. And it doesn't look like this financial year now is profitable. Less unprofitable than the previous year. But I remember that in a lot of these games, I've been able to get the company into profit in the second year, but this time it's not going to happen. Doesn't look like, anyway. Now, I would like to see if there are any other freight lines I can set up here, or any other bus lines that could bring in a little bit more revenue. There is a road there that comes pretty close to connecting. You see that's built by one of the competitors. So theoretically I could put in a bus line between Slentstown, that town there, and one of my towns. Question is more capitalization when I don't really want to run that debt up and I have only limited revenue. And those things are not obviously contradictory. Can't really take the debt on because my revenue can't service it. And actually the company just barely got out of more serious debt there. It's heavily reliant on that one coal train, which is a vulnerable position for it to be in, obviously. But I could put in a road here and see if I can get a bus station built in that city. Then I can run buses. And as I've said earlier, these buses could make more money than the ones I'm running already because the distances considerably greater, and in the Transport Tycoon universe, that actually will give you more revenue. The land is not even, but that's in line with the other construction I've done. But I'm short on revenue, because basically that coal train is the only thing really making me money right now. So I just barely flattened it out there. So now, if I go down here, this is actually a wider gapped bridge. I thought that it would be easy, but I was confusing the railway and the road in my head. Even the grading wouldn't necessarily be perfect if I followed the rail line, so it probably makes sense just to do a separate route here. Yeah, I can do it to there, and then turn, and then regrade. Because the less regrading you have to do, the better. I mean, as in real life, it just costs less money if you don't have to do as much regrading. And some of the regrading in Transport Tycoon is phenomenally expensive. Like one regrading sometimes can cost as much as a locomotive, in fact. And the locomotives in Transport Tycoon are a bit overpriced, actually. The train is loaded up. I was going to say, why is it not departing? And there it's departing. Could use that revenue. course, one of the strange things about Transport Tycoon is that you need a conventional train station, a passenger station, for pretty much any kind of loading and unloading of freight. But with road vehicles, bus stations and trucking terminals are distinct from each other, which is a little strange. It might be, again, the British bias of the game, because in Britain, modern passenger trains are mostly passenger. Modern trains are mostly passenger. And some freight trains historically used the passenger stations. Most famously, the beer train from Burton-on-Trent to London St. Pancras, which now the Eurostar terminal in St. Pancras Station used to be the beer cellar, in fact. And as you'll notice in this particular game of Transport Tycoon, I haven't built any trucking terminals or truck terminals or whatever you want to call them. Actually, I can build this road now. Of course, one of the things about Britain is they historically didn't call trucks trucks, they called them lorries. So the whole idea of a trucking terminal or a truck terminal being called that is a little bit strange, especially when you consider that the trucks, when you try to purchase them in Transport Tycoon, are generally called lorries. So that is a false alarm, actually, because the only reason it's saying that is that my company's deeply in debt in terms of cash. But that will be negated as soon as the coal train delivers. And that will be less time than we need. Okay, so more than enough revenue there to cover that without taking out a loan. And I guess the next step is I will need to build facilities in Slunt Town for the buses. So we'll need a terminal station, and we'll need a depot. But I don't have any suitable land here, so I'll have to figure out some way of handling that. So if we level this land out, we can put a bus station in. Still don't have enough cash, that's annoying. So again, we get basically a false alarm that we're out of money. I'll have more than enough money in a few minutes. And there it is. We'll build the bus station there. Trouble is, I don't have a place for the depot, necessarily. What I could do is I could demolish the bus station there and put them side by side. So if I extend the road there, raise the land there. There's the truck station. That's the term they use. Truck station. Okay, so we can put in the bus station, but the town will not let me for political reasons, which are totally unexplained, although it might have to do with the fact that I demolished the first one. And I did this other terraforming, if you will. I'll put in the depot and see if that helps me at all. But then I'm out of money again. I have to wait for revenue. Against the odds, my opponent just pulled in 3,000 in revenue from that flight. Not normally something you can pull off very easily, but that's forgetting about the tremendous expense. Okay, well they still won't let me build the bus station. I can try a few other locations. For example, I could put it on a side street here, instead of at the end of a street. The main street. We're out of revenue. Or we're out of cash, not revenue. To wait for revenue to get the cash. What am I going to do? I guess I have to wait for that coal train to deliver. Only departing now, though. So anyway, I was in profit, but I'm running out of time with this. I think I'd like to do the other games, and I'll turn this into a long play over the longer term. Thanks for watching.